and welcome to De-tox, that is Disruptive Talks on Education. And I'm your host for today, that is Anupma Mahajan. The topic for today is the effect on CSR post-pandemic detox. The pandemic also highlighted the importance of bringing together different stakeholders to work collaboratively with the government to support communities in need. We must be cognizant of the fact that company profits have also been hit as various industries tackled economic headwinds in these times. The CSR activities are needed the most. Today we have with us a very special guest, Corporate Head CSR Jindal Stainless Steel Limited, Brigadier Rajiv Williams. Welcome to the show, sir. Brigadier Rajiv Williams has initiated several projects on education, skill training, disability, health, women empowerment, agriculture, clean drinking water, solar water projects, carbon mitigation strategies, business and human rights, and so on at Jindal Steel. Brigadier Williams has been a member on boards of many organizations to include the United Nations Global Compact Network UNGC and has been member CSR committees of industry associations and educational institutions. As a convener of the UNGC Human Rights Committee, he created the India CEO Forum on Business and Human Rights under the chairmanship of Mr. Narayanan Murthy, Chairman, Emeritus Infosys. In his military service, Brigadier Rajiv Williams was awarded gallantry awards to include Youth Seva Medal and mention in dispatches for operations in the Kargil and Siachen sectors. His civil awards include Singapore-based Asia Pacific Leadership Award, Top 100 Most Impactful Global CSR Leaders Award by the World CSR Congress, Top 25 CSR Leaders in India, Human Rights and Most Excellent CSR Award, and the Mahatma Awards for CSR. So welcome to the show, sir. Effect on CSR post-pandemic detox. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anupama, for introducing me as a speaker and for inviting me to talk on detox. Detox. And yet the subject matter itself for today is effect on CSR, post-pandemic detox. I think, it's a proud privilege for me to come this morning and speak to the audience. Unfortunately, I can't see. It's so different today as of yesterday when we could see the audience. And today is more of digital. And thank you, Dr. Gandhi, for being here to inspire many people who are online today, hopefully listening in and hopefully trying to support this very act, what I will share in a bit, and many others before me would have done likewise and will do subsequently too. Well, I am Brigadier Rajiv Williams, as introduced, from a defense background, a veteran from the infantry, moving on to the corporate sector and moving on to the very project of engaging with communities, engaging with people, because people are centric to all that we think and do as far as corporate world is concerned. When I go back in years and I think and reflect, why are we deployed in the most difficult areas in India across our borders in the defense? It's for a commitment. It's for the sanctity of the line that we are required to guard and protect. It's for the respect for the people whom we are actually supporting and protecting. And unless we have the people with us, unless the communities where we are deployed are with us, aligned, we'll have things like Kargil. We'll have operations which will be difficult because if we do not have, there's a chasm between the community and the people whom we are supposed to protect. If there's a divide there, then you'll have many Kargils like that. I'm not going to be debating on that. But what I want to share is that similar thing when I moved almost 16, 17 years ago, having left the army and moved straight into corporate social responsibility when it was just taking shape. There was a quiz in my mind. What is an infantry guy going to do with communities? And then I go back in years and I say that no, if we get the buy in from the very people where our plants are located, where we have occupied their lands and moved on, where we have shifted from the community from an open kind of a living environment to a very small, caged environment of a walled sector. You occupied the lands. You are equally responsible for the very fact that you are actually engaging with the communities because we are protecting them. It is in line to this kind of a discussion that moved me to the fact that our responsibility lies with the people where we are located. And there are so many projects that need to be focused on. Projects not what I'm thinking as the head of the corporate social responsibility domain, but projects which the community wants us to take care of. That is a subtle difference which most of us really falter. It's what I think is what I need to do rather than what the community needs, and need based approach is where we miss out on. I do these projects, or our company does these projects through a foundation. The corporate social responsibility is being done by Jindal Stainless Foundation, and the chairperson of that is none other than Mrs. Deepika Jindal, the wife of the chairman, a person who is very passionate about the entire thing and very easy to make sure to understand what are the projects. And I'm not going to be deep diving into the CSR committees and the approvals and thereafter. It's a very simple process. So if you get the buy-in from the top, the situation becomes so much better to make sure that all the projects are implemented. Now, with that as the backdrop, I have a very short presentation which maybe for ease of understanding, I could actually share it on the screen, which I will in a moment. But I thought I'll give you this kind of a background before I get started with this particular domain of actually working on that what is our CSR project all about. And if you can see the screen, it's making Bharat Atma Nirbhar since 1970. It's in the DNA that actually we started this corporate social responsibility engagement. And therefore, we started this off many years ago. Most of the large corporations have been doing corporate social responsibility equivalent charity. Charity is different to what I'm speaking today. It's to do with communities, what they need, and not I'm putting up a school or a hospital or giving them finances and they will say tomorrow, excuse me, I don't know you. Because there's no direct engagement of philanthropy of a different order, which many were used to for years down the line. But when you start engaging with communities, when we work through the corporate social responsibility agenda, and as I mentioned, is to improve lives and see how best we can take this forward. And that's how we have been doing our little homework and doing our work. So briefly, I will, of course, browse over some of these points that I have listed for you is projects which have nothing to do with steel or stainless steel. And our company, Jindal Stainless Limited, is the largest stainless steel player in India and amongst the top 10, the largest in the world. That doesn't make a difference. The difference makes is the communities all have to be with you. So whether it's agriculture or whether it's to do with many other CSR projects that I'll be sharing with you, is something which I think is important for us to understand. Many of us have been doing corporate social responsibility over the years. Then came the pandemic, knock, knock, excuse me. And there was an absolute standstill. So it is important for us to understand that we have to see that from philanthropic model to engaging with communities, the how and the what are we required to do? Is it only in terms of numbers? Is it only in terms of touching lives of a million lives or a billion hearts? Or is it to do with quality? Quality. I mean, we've been talking about the investments. I don't say a spend, I'm talking about investments that are being done in this domain of corporate social responsibility. The government has got 17 ministries looking after the social sector. One ministry does not know as to what the other ministry is doing. Are we actually engaging or are we improving the lives, the education, for example? Are we touched upon the children who can actually be called as educated youth? Are we talking about the quality? Are we talking about 80% of India is literate? Or are we talking about that 10% of India can do the reading at class 5 or class 10? Are we talking about the employment skills that are required for the industry today? Or we are used to a particular curricula which is being worked on for years, and there is a mismatch between the industry and between the community, between the government. And partnerships therefore become important. So we need to change in approach an exclusive capitalistic to collective coordination. And for that, I think the 2 years of 20 and 21 were important for us to remind ourselves the world over, stop. Just stop. Just revive yourselves because that is the only way to survive. I don't know how many of you are from the Delhi NCR region who are listening in to me today. Did you see the change which took place in those 2 years as far as pollution levels of Delhi NCR is concerned? It was ranking pretty high during that period of mid 2020 to mid 2021. And last week it was the most polluted city in the world. So there was a requirement of that stop piece. When we stopped, we realized where we have faltered. When we saw that little girl, a young girl, taking her father 1200 kilometers on a cycle, when we saw that reverse migration taking place, was the government, was the corporate sector actually thinking through what will happen when suddenly this thing strikes? I don't think so. I don't think we were really aware that such a calamity could happen. It happened 100 years ago. It happens in a smaller way. We talk about a limited way. We talk in the defense, limited war, etc., etc. Kargil was a limited war. Or when there is a strike in a particular Kashmir part, lives are affected. Or it happens somewhere or a blow up in the area of Imphal or some other location. Lives are affected. And we've got to be prepared for that to make sure that we and the government collaborate and survive. Are we thinking about carbon mitigation in a big way? Are we talking and thinking about what actually needs to be done other than the usual stuff of education, healthcare, women empowerment, which I will also be speaking about? Are we talking anything to do with finding the resources which are available in our country and are being extracted and taken to China or taken to Japan or taken to Bolivia for processing, and then we are importing that in a very big expense, at a very big expense? Why are your EV batteries so costly? Why is your electric cars who are going to be finding a place on the roads by 2030, there will be only EV cars, supposedly? What are we doing with batteries? Where is that lithium ion batteries coming from? Are we importing it from China? Now, those are the issues that corporates need to get engaged and find out about certain things about rare earth. And that I think was important as far as to revive our own economy and to survive, we've got to move on. Therefore, the effect on CSR changes due to the pandemic. I would touch upon the three steps of sustainable living. And the corporates need to go beyond the bottom lines, beyond the business agenda, beyond just collecting wealth. Sharing of wealth is more important than just collecting. And that is why we've got to have a platform to learn and share and report. If you don't measure the outcomes and if you do not report the outcomes, nothing gets done. So I will touch upon these aspects. And the first thing is itself of detox. So I just talked about the initial bit was about the detox piece. The detox being spoken at detox reflects upon the change which took place due to the pandemic. Digital divide. Delhi, NCR, Mumbai, Kolkata, Bangalore, or other big cities, no worries. There are people, there are families, there are schools, there are systems in place for the reasonable schools. But what about the mass? When we go to Orissa, to the rural, poor community, there are schools are there. Did we have any kind of a facility for them to learn online? I'm not only talking about the students, I'm talking about the teachers. I'm talking about the government systems. Every school 20 years ago or 15 years ago were given X numbers of computers. Very neatly packed and locked for years till the time they were to be changed or thrown away. The call is quite similar. And your heart goes out to those people that despite the fact that the government has provided them the resources, yet the schools do not want to open up their boxes and take out the computers and put them on road. Corporates can keep talking about the fact that it is the responsibility of the government. Aren't we equally responsible? To improve the digital divide is something which we as corporations have been doing. We must do, but in a very specific way of education. Online was the biggest challenge. You saw what happened in the reverse migration which took place. People went back to their villages. People were sick. People were dying. Dying because of lack of resources, lack of oxygen. Plants like ours, I mean, we've got the facility and support systems, but there were challenges of even transporting your oxygen, liquid oxygen, LNOs, from one place to another because of certain strictures of the local governance. Shipping it out from Orissa to Delhi and NCR and to northern regions of hospitals, it took us a bit of time. Or from Hisar, our projects in Hisar. So the gears worked up. I'm not only talking about Jindal Stainless Limited, but whether JSW, Jindal Saw, or Tatas, or Vedanta, or whichever big corporates who could facilitate, all started moving their LNOs, trying to supply. But it took you almost 20 days. That critical moment was lost. So health-related issues were humongous, absolutely humongous. Everybody was making masks, very important. Everybody was thinking of working out on those aprons and on those coats. There were so many casualties of the doctors. The complete change took place. Therefore, the government, of course, very coolly, in amongst those 13 activities listed under the article, under section 13, came up that even support for pandemic will be included in CSR. Whether it's included or not, don't worry, do it. And if you do that, you get that satisfaction in your heart if you've been able to save lives, if you've been able to help communities. So the existing health systems completely changed. People were not trained adequately, and that changed. And when we saw this reverse migration, especially from Delhi, NCR, Mumbai, other big cities, moving back to their villages for what? They had nothing to do there. Had we trained them? Many of them have not returned back. Have we been able to empower the communities in those kind of geographies where the employment opportunity is available? It may not be what they have been used to because they've been trained that way, but it could be things like on agriculture, supply chains, management systems. Many of them had that kind of a resource with them. They were educated and strong, but they had to be skilled. And they cannot be skilled only by a corporate doing some kind of an activity of the government. We've got to work together. And in some places, we made some great examples to share. Because you've got to strengthen your collaborations. You've got to be collaborative. You know, the most difficult thing, if you ask me the truth, we keep talking about it. I'm not talking about the PPP model. I'm not talking about the public-private model, but the third and the fourth P of the people. You've got to get them involved in whatever you do, right from the time of setting up a project to making sure that that PPP model becomes effective. Strengthen collaboration. That's the learning was during the pandemic. And therefore, that affected many of our CSR projects to be realigned, redefined. Even our own resource persons could not visit the field. So, monitoring and evaluation of a physical movement was affected. I could not go to our various projects across the country. But there were situations, there were systems that needed to be developed and worked upon, and yet you were doing the monitoring. And today's farmer or today's poor, so called poor, reasonably poor, the Adivasis, they've got a brilliant mind. They've got that go in them. They will teach you more than what I think we can. So the three ways of sustainable living, I thought, is that first is sustainable living is based on the fundamental right of caring for one another. If you care for each other, you become more socially inclusive. It's not just that something that I'm doling out funds. If you work on that premise that I have engaged a particular NGO or a partner and they better do what I think they should do, then there is a mismatch. There is a mismatch because once that partnership of 2 years or 3 years is over, you will be doing the thing right from the bottom again. There has to be a respect for your partners. So when you collaborate, you have to respect what they are professionals have been doing for years, respect their way, and then engage with them. Yes, support them with new technologies. That's exactly, I think, we did in many of the corporates really got down to it. When I talked about digital divide, now they don't have the resources or the acumen or the thought or the management systems, but that's where you got to get them going. You've got to engage with them. So bring in new technologies and mitigate various challenges, especially in the area of climate change and agenda. Delhi, NCR. I mean, why? During the Commonwealth Games, let's take 10 years ago, the traffic moved. There were rules of engagement, there were traffic rules, there was monitoring, there was very heavy penalties for those who are not listening to you. Things moved. You will say, yes, now in the last 10 years, the traffic on the roads has gone many times over, so number of vehicles have increased. The infrastructure has also improved, but not at that pace. Yet, We've got to work on this particular thing that, the pollution levels have to come down. Don't blame it to just the farmers who are burning their pralines or their dried wheat. What about the construction? What about the vehicle pollution? How can you really resolve that? Is it okay to keep building and constructing using technologies which are almost bygones? Technological revolutions have to be actually worked upon. They are expensive, so invest for CSR funds for that. Invest your company funds for improving technologies, for mitigating carbon dioxide emissions. There are many ways that you can do it. It's costly. But if we're only looking at the bottom lines and we don't work in that area, to survive, you have to work towards it. And the purpose is making sure that there is collective growth, secure, and yet be profitable. So go beyond business, empower women, empower the communities, let them come to the steel sector. How many women earlier were actually working in the steel sector? Most find comfort zones, obviously, and rightly so, in the areas of information technology, in the areas of hospitality, in the areas where actually physical activities were available, but their skills were limited. So when we go beyond business, and when we have a look at the different kinds of formats of projects, some of them I'm highlighting over here: education and skill training, women empowerment and entrepreneurship development, integrated healthcare, especially during the time of the pandemic, which I've just shared with you, and environment protection. How many of us are actually investing in our own companies in making sure that they have got the processes in place which will reduce the carbon emissions, which will reduce the SOx and the NOxes, which will convert that into powerhouses itself? Why don't you use solar? Why don't you use the alternative technologies? I mean, when you go to a plant in Orissa, for example, you've got a huge reservoir like any other power plant or any other steel sector has. How many of us are using that for floating solar panels? How many of us are just doing tree plantation and not bothering about whether that tree survives after 2 years? Yes, billion trees have been planted, and therefore we've been able to save so much of carbon emissions. I wouldn't like to use some of the words that some of our colleagues use. But unless you can ensure that what you have done is not only right, but is righteous, and that's the difference. Righteous means survivability. So tree plantation is you've done. You have consumed a lot. You've thrown it somewhere else. Your garbage has been disposed of not in my backyard, but in somebody else's backyard. Where are we going to learn all this? I think pandemic taught us even the health hazards because of the hospitals, hospital waste, created a lot of problems. That's where I think it was important for us to engage in waste management. How we can empower the rag pickers and the communities who are there to help you to pick up your garbage and use it as a wealth. So, waste to wealth projects we've been talking about, we've been converting into energy, etc., etc. But there are challenges that you've placed those huge facilities in areas where people live, and obviously there are attenuated problems thereafter. How many of us are talking about sustainable farming? Increasing farmers' income, everybody spoke about. Doubling farmers' income, everybody speaks about. But the how and the what to do is a challenge. What happened during the pandemic? What happened during the demonetization? When overnight your liquid cash had gone. Did we think of a liquid cash being transferred through digital technologies? How many of us were engaged prior to this kind of a happening? Well, I'm proud to share that our sustainable farming continued even at that stage when the logistics became the biggest challenge, when funding became the biggest challenge for the farmers with that short cropping window that they had of just 2 weeks of seed plantation, of the funds that are required for the seed plantation. They don't have. They're small farmers. Even a 10,000 or a 5,000 for procurement of the seeds at the right time. If you don't have liquid cash, how would you survive? Well, some of our practice through our partner, Brahmanati Foundation, which is working in this space for a bit of a time, and a young guy, it was a startup from IIT Kharagpur, leaving his his work in McKinsey in the US and comes back and starts working with the farming community, developing such models, which Niti Aayog said that we want to replicate it to 12 districts, aspirational districts. That gives you a joy. That gives you that a hope. That transformation is important even in CSR. And obviously, the right to live, the right to be educated, the right to health is all about business and human rights. So, some of these pictorial glimpses that I'm sharing with you is on some of our projects which may be of interest to you, of drinking water, of health, of even creating a producer company. In Orissa, remote Orissa, we've got these women who've got together. These women self-help groups have got together and made their own company. We give them support up to a point till the time they can do things on their own. We've got some brilliant projects, including making of sanitary napkins and upgrading their skills. So it's not only that something which people in the communities in larger towns are aware of on health issues. It's all related to health, water, your sanitary napkins usage, etc., makes a difference in the lives of people to live in a more benefit for themselves and for the families. We've upgraded the skills, we've upgraded the technology, and that's where I think it has made a difference. Now, this is some of our projects around the Asmita brand. That's got a branding, it makes jackets and gives it to the corporations, the safety jackets. There are, of course, work orders that they are being received. So there is a pretty self-sustaining project, especially during the change that took place in the Asmita project, was that it worked on not only making your masks and gloves, but also making safety jackets. And the complete foci of this project of a production unit with a branding which has got a registration in the MSME sector, including Sahaj, has got the branding and everything else, including our self-help groups. So that makes it interesting how we can take these things forward. And of course, we've got some projects which I will just share with you, for example, on domestic violence, which peaked during the pandemic. And this is a project that, if you can see the slide, is to do with golden grass. I'm sure many of us are already doing it, but this was the project with the difference. It is the golden grass project of making bags and purses with a stainless steel handle for markets which were there in India, but then their markets are more abroad. This was even projected during the Tokyo Olympics. A stall was there. The orders have come directly. And it's a community. I mean, we've got nothing to do with it. We only empower them through our partners, and then this is being done by them now. And you just feel satisfied and helping them out. Similarly, as I mentioned to you earlier, the women coming into this area of stainless steel products, they are working on the shop floors with their male colleagues and counterparts. And that exclusive domain of male chauvinistic views that don't you come in our area has been broken when they realize that the women force who are being inducted into a stainless steel manufacturing facility, working shoulder to shoulder with their male colleagues in the fireplaces, in the furnaces, as also in other areas of quality management. It has improved the sales, it has improved the ethics of respecting communities, respecting the women. We've done some of the skilling for the locals who've also gone back in stainless steel fabrication. And stainless steel, the per capita stainless steel percentage is still very low in India as compared to the world figures. And I hope such kind of support systems, if we are being able to give to the locals and skilling them in a product where we've got the expertise and helping them out to set up foundries, to set up their own little workshops and give the communities, even the poor, want the best because the buying part has improved. And we've got these waste management activities going on. We've got these areas of even fabricating some of the stainless steel e-rickshaws, which are taking stuff across. And this is what I talked about, domestic violence. During the pandemic, world over, the percentage of domestic violence increased. How many of us corporates are working on this? How many of us are actually deep diving into a small thing of actually explaining what are the rights of communities? What are the rights of women who are being traumatized day in and day out and they do not have a voice? So we launched this project in October 2020, and this helpline is providing services to the women and the child victims of domestic violence. It's very confidential and yet it's very impactful. Even if you can help out two women a month, it's a great feel. Similar things of club foot. We've done something on the club foot of children in Orissa and Hisar and other places through Cure Foundation, a great project. So I think we've got to understand that how we can collaborate with partners who've got the expertise in this domain, stop domestic violence, has been a very successful project. Though numbers may be small, the volume may be small, but the quality is ensured and some lives are saved. Agriculture, has spoken a bit about it, but it's good that we have been able to work with the communities on sustainable farming, giving them the opportunities of solar water pumps, giving them the opportunity of providing them the capacities that are required for them to use less water in their crops, even change the cropping pattern. With the water problems that are taking place, you have to work towards changing the cropping pattern. Millets have come in a big way. And why not? The the rice intensive methodologies, SRIs as they are called, use less water and yet produce a better quality of rice. But the markets remain a challenge. So you've got to do the back end linkages. It's, for example, let's take, there is one variety of bhog rice or something it's called. It's fantastic. The aroma is great. Never tried out in a geography somewhere close to Orissa. It's only in Kolkata and West Bengal, which is famous. But when we developed it, the market were not around because it's expensive. It goes to Kolkata. It goes to Delhi through these. But there are these middlemen, obviously, those challenges are being faced. So there are many projects that we worked on sustainable farming. It's nothing to do with steel, it's nothing to do with stainless steel, but it's to do with communities and by building that bottom line, by reduction of their input cost and increasing their output costs. It's not that you're going to double the production level, but you're doubling their income by reducing the seed money, by financing mechanisms, as also making sure the logistics are available. And they don't have to go to the mandi, and the mandi system, you know how sometimes gets difficult. That nexus is being broken and it works. And then we come to the sustainable waste management, which I spoke in the beginning. It focuses on the disposal, proper disposal of waste, whether it's waste or dry waste. It's to do with single-use plastic. It's a question of awareness campaign. It's a question of making the material recovery facilities. And I've seen abroad, how beautifully everything is organized. How beautifully those segments are there only for, let's take the e-waste, or you take only for bulbs, or you're taking only for paper or for cardboard packaging. There is difference. Why can't we have these facilities here? Most of us travel and we see a lot. And I was really touched upon my visit to one of the places in Australia, in Alice Springs, and I saw the waste recovery facility is so beautifully done. And shared the picture with our partner, which is Green Dream Foundation, doing a great work. And I feel that, whatever experiences we can share from the heart and we can change the lives of people, we must do it. And lastly, I tell you that if corporates are thinking of going to scale, you can't do it on your own. You have to have partnership with the government. The government can go to scale. So collaboration with the government, municipal bodies, collaboration with the government schools, collaboration with the government ministries, different ministries, if you want to take it to fruition of a project in scale, partnerships is the answer. And that's why I think those three frameworks, those three pillars of the framework of the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights become imperative: protect, responsibility of the state; respect, responsibility of the corporations; and find remedy and solutions. And then only can you get that license to operate and scale. So, if we do this and if we can align our activities to the SDGs, then we are talking some sense that you're working towards the fulfillment of the SDGs by 2030. Hopefully. Some of the SDGs that I've listed out here is where we are engaging with them. I can't do all the 17 SDGs. I can't do all 10, though they are interlinked, intertwined. But yes, there has to be some sort of a benchmark of reporting, and that's through the digital technology that we have been able to enforce. So, in conclusion, identify and rework on CSR projects to ensure dynamism. SDG 17 is on collaborations, become more important post pandemic, and come up with innovative solutions which will be mutually beneficial and rewarding. Because I believe, and I'm sure you will understand, that it's all about the connect between the head and the heart. And everybody understands, whether he's standing before you from Orissa or from West Bengal or from Tamil Nadu with different languages. Everybody understands the language of the heart. Thank you very much for giving me a patient hearing. And I think I'll pause here. And if there be any questions, then I will be happy to share or take them on or come back to you later. So, with that, I will cease my presentation and I will do the stop sharing piece. I hope I have stopped sharing my presentation. Am I right, Anupama? Over to you.
Thank you so
No,
much, sir, for enlightening us with. So it has been really, really very interesting to listen about the projects and how you've been handling. We have a question from the audience here. How in the real world can CSR align to SDG 4, most pressing needs of all times?
well, I just, in fact, to answer your question, when we talk about an SDG alignment, as long as you can link what you're doing with an SDG, whether it's poverty alleviation, which has got a very, very broad stance, or whether you're talking of in terms of only education or only environment of SDG level, or you're talking about something to do with waste management or health. All these have been very clearly articulated, distinctly made as far as your SDGs are concerned. Now, your question relates that how do we do it? It's not the question how you do it. Everybody is doing it very well. The question is how are you reporting? How are you aligning and making sure that this kind of a thing takes place? That is something which I think is very, very distinct as far as corporates are concerned. So, if we talk about just SDG 1, no poverty, or if we talk about, let's take, what does it imply? No poverty implies what? It implies a number of other SDGs which are linked into it, including no hunger or the good health care systems. All this will reduce your poverty alleviation of SDG 1. So there are two, three SDGs are linked to it. Similarly with education. And that's exactly what I've been speaking about. The fact is that we need to work this out in a more dynamic way, in a more way that we can understand. Those 13 activities listed under Article 13, what are they? Is it just binding on us? There are many other areas that are business and human rights. It's not listed anywhere. If it's not listed anywhere, that does not mean that right to education is not part of business and human rights. Right to clean drinking water, which happens to be in SDG 6, is not listed over there. It is part of business and human rights. That is how I look at it. Only thing is that we must report in those segments, in those SDGs, in your SROI, it must come forth very clearly. Thank you.
Sir, beautifully
Yeah, I can see a
explained.
number of questions.
We request the CRs to, sorry, the question here, we request the CSRs to adopt literacy as there is a colossal problem. It will take funding to make sure every child knows the foundational skills. As another person here is asking, we are an education NGO. How do you support education?
Right. I mean, these questions are very formative and basic. How do we support education? How do we invest? Don't say spend. Somebody has written, can we spend or can we ask for support? You have the right to ask. We have the right to invest in the communities. The how piece, how much, what expectations is a different conversation. We are already investing. But education can only be done as a one vertical if that corporate is not a manufacturing corporate. Why I want to bring this point out is for a service industry. You can have pan India presence. You can take one vertical of education. If it is the hospitals or if it is IT, Infosys can have the liberty of taking on or Wipro or something only on IT sector education. It's not only good for their business, which is not important. That should not be linked to the business in any case as far as CSR is concerned. But it is empowerment in a particular domain. If it is Max Foundation or if it is some other hospital, Apollos, they can do health clinics, they can work on health excuse pan India. There is a difference here when we come to a manufacturing industry, to an extractive industry, where you have occupied lands of communities, where you move them out. Excuse me, I have to use this piece of land for setting up my power plant. I have to use this land to put up my steel industry. Hello? Where are those people going? Those people are being moved to smaller places, to a housing facility which you have provided. You've given them a boundary wall. Excuse me, here is where you think, where am I going to take my cattle? I'm used to open defecation. My habits have to change. सोच जो है ना सबसे बड़ी चीज होती है. Therefore, you have to do education for them. You have to provide health systems for them. You have to provide them employment opportunity, employable skills, not employment, but employable skills to get their employment, either in your own company or set up their own entrepreneurial activities. So develop their management systems and entrepreneur, and they are brilliant, I'm telling you. If I'm talking about the community who is doing on a workstation or even let's take a production unit of making garments, the color combinations that they come up with are fantastic, which none of the NID guys can think about. They need skills of making that product saleable. To improve their skills. Then you come to infrastructure, whether it's schools, or whether it's roads, culverts, water, pollution. Now, Kalinga Nagar is a small cap in Jajpur district, Nurissa. The largest steel and power plants are there. You name it. You've got Jindals, you've got Tatas, you've got Visa Steel, you've got Royal Steel, you've got, you name it, all of them are there. What happens to that water? Is water is coming from only one source, Brahmani River. What happens to the SOx and the NOxes which are out in the air from all this plant? Is the pollution going to be a huge impact, a huge? How is it going to help the agriculture piece? How is the vegetables going to be saleable? All that has to be targeted. So I'm just trying to share that education is one part, one vertical, but there are many verticals. So the X amount that you've got in CSR has to be distributed. Unlike service industry, if I'm using my mobile, then I by my mobile, then this mobile can, that mobile technology can be taken across the country. I'll only work on that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Uh, there's another question from the audience here. Please let us know that how you support in leveraging technologies.
How do you leverage and support green technologies? Well, one is the alternative sources of energy that I talked about, the even solar panels floating in our reservoirs, solar panels on our buildings. Solar panels is something which may not be successful in some regions, but notice, sir, definitely when we do that, the statistics of what kind of solar energy is available in areas of Orissa, it's huge. Capitalize on it. We've been trying to do our bit. It's expensive, mind you. It's not that just. And where does that extra, if our energy requirement is X, which is being fulfilled because of captive power plant, then we have to put it in the national grid. Now, there is a payback period. There is something which needs to be done as far as the government price points are concerned of giving that kind of alternative sources of energy on the grid. All these things have to be taken care of. So that's one piece. The second thing is when we talk about green technologies, alternative sources of fuels, is I just spoke very briefly on the rare earth materials. All your telephones, all your screens, this computer screen in front of me, the batteries that are being used in our electric cars is all rare earth. What are we doing about it? Recently, there's been some talk. Well, I'll be happy to share with you that we have started a project on this where we can actually make a difference, and I hope that will be successful. Model. That's something different. Nobody is thinking about these things. There is Kabil, which is an organization which has been created to do this investments, to do this particular talk that I'm across the world. How much successful models have we found? Very few. We don't even know about it. I'm talking to you. I don't think you've even heard of it. Very few could have heard of it. So those are the new innovative technologies which needs to be brought in. That is where we will make an impact on green technologies. And green technologies is waste management is again part of what I'm talking about. हम अपने घर में पहले सीखें ये. How can we mitigate those problems? And then we go to scale. And the most thing is, I mentioned to you earlier, it is the idea which has to emanate from each one of us, you and me. How can we make that change? How can we respect each other? How can we say thank you when somebody gives you water? It all makes a difference. That is how we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you for answering that. Is it possible that all the CSRs adopt literacy for 1 year as their sole intervention? Because the most important thing is that the students should start reading. There's been huge reading loss, learning loss, and this will bring a visible change in literacy rates. What do you suggest, sir?
Well, I think I can read that from Madam Yusra Fatima. I know. I mean, why education? Why not waste management? Why not just cleaning up the air? Everybody puts in a CSR. Uh, Let me tell you one thing. Despite the law of 2013, which has mandated that 2% of investment, not spending, investment of profits, the profits have to be invested into CSR. How much value have we created by corporate social responsibility investments in the last 9 years or 8 years, 7 years? It's a significant amount from 25,000 crores. to about 65 or 67,000 crores. Is that enough? When you talk about the government spending lakhs of crores on social development? So CSR spending is a very small percentage. I'm saying the right spending. Education में आप कह रही हैं, आपने पूछा ये सवाल. Yet in education, if we say 1 year we only do an education, what kind of education? Why not talk about the teachers? Educate them, empower them. Have we been able to give them the salaries that are expected? What the world is giving to the salaries of teachers? Are we doing that? We talk about government norms and the pay commission and etc. etc. Let's be truthful and honest. You can educate your helper's child. How many of us do it? If we don't do it in our own homes, what are we talking about going and doing the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan and saying so many lives have been touched because of our literacy programs, whereas on the ground, when you see that a child of class 5 can't even read and write a simple sentence even to date.
Exactly.
And then we are saying 60% of our population is still in the poorest of the poor or living in areas which are isolated, which have very little facilities, which are the rural community. Touch upon that. So education is there, but we cannot do a 1 year investment only on education also. You can't mandate it. Nobody's going to accept it. Yep.
What is the flagship
Question.
initiative of your
Yep.
foundation?
Asit Srivastav, what is the flagship initiative of your foundation? I mentioned, if you had seen my slide, that sustainable agriculture is one of our flagship programs. Sustainable waste management is a flagship program. These two are critical, I feel, because it's innovative, it is different from the normal, and it is not only the question of doubling farmers' income, but how to double the farmers' income is what is important. Farming has been, and mind you, the contributor of methane gas of carbon is farming. Unless we improve their technologies, unless we address this issue of how to use less water, how to make sure that you're doing the right crop and you've got the markets available. All this is linked to climate change. And I think that's where the investments are taking place and should take place. And others, of course, are important equally, maybe, but these two are our flagship programs. I hope I've answered your question, Asif. And you can Google our thing and you can engage with our partners. Gramonati Foundation, Google them. Green Dream Foundation, Google them. And I think you will get your answers. Thank you very much. Anybody else before I wind up? It's time.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for being with us on these talks. The pandemic has ascertained the spontaneity of calamities and how, within a matter of days, the world can drop to its knees. Socially beneficial corporate activities are investments in the progress of a society. Private philanthropic entities, using the tools of collaboration, communication, and knowledge sharing, can redefine the development map of India and accelerate the pace of development like never before. Jindal Steel has been on the forefront in socially relevant issues and it's been huge having you with us on this show, sir. Thank you, everybody, for patiently listening. Thank you, sir, for being with us on this show. Thank you. Sir,
Thank you very much.
you
Thank you,
can stay
everybody.
on later.